Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Firefighters Podcast, where we seek to develop, inspire, and motivate the world of the emergency services operator through a series of wide-ranging conversations. Now, before we go any further, just hit that rate, follow, or subscribe button on whatever platform you're listening to. It's a key performance indicator for us and helps us reach even more people. Now, here's what we've got for you today. Ladies and gents, boys and girls, it is my extreme pleasure to finally be able to announce the release of our first ever mobile app, Drillbook. Drillbook has been in development for probably the past 5 or 6 months. Myself and a massively talented member of the team, Adam, have been putting this together. Drillbook is built to be the home of training ideas for drill grounds across the fire and rescue service all over the world. The goal of the app is to deliver a community-built library of content built by firefighters for firefighters. If you jump onto the App Store, if you look in the notes and the links below the podcast, you'll find a way to get onto Drillbook, and you'll find it on social media as well. This is built for new officers, instructors, training reference holders, firefighters in development, people going for application, people going for interview. You will find an area in there specifically with all of the instant debriefs. So if you're a big fan of the instant debriefs that we do on the podcast, you can go in there specifically and look at one area where they all kept. There's Knots and Lines demos on there. There's radio messages where you can build your own messages and get into that habit of what you're looking for and how it should look. There's quick reference guides. There's interview questions, tactics, training, guidance. And you have the ability as well to put in all of your fantastic training ideas. What's that great drill you've done on station? What's that one you saw when you were covering somewhere else? Bang that into the app and share it with the whole world. We don't want to see all of these great ideas and these great training tips die when these people retire. So jump in there, have a look, input your own training ideas, and be part of a community-built library of content built by firefighters for firefighters all over the world. Go check it out. Roger, welcome to the podcast, my friend. How are you?
I'm good, thank you very much indeed. Yeah, been a busy week, as you can imagine.
It has been colossal. We actually saw some of your boys and girls at Birmingham Airport Monday night.
Okay.
I was there in my capacity with International Search and Rescue, and it was great to see so many people from a variety of services. I think it's 14 services up and down the UK, but also there was a number of people from a number of Welsh firefighters, both from, and I'll get these wrong now, Mid and West Wales, but also South Wales. They're kicking ass, taking names, heading out to Turkey. Maybe that's a nice place for us to start, because that is a strange thing to have land on your doorstep. How do you give people an insight on how you deal with those things as a chief fire officer when that sort of comes across your desk?
Yeah, I think it's very much on the periphery of what we do. So just to wind back, we had a new fire authority which convened last July, and we've done a lot of education piece with them about the range of things that services get involved with. And they are, without doubt, shocked and surprised, and pleasantly surprised in terms of what the scale and scope of the things that fire and rescue services get involved with these days.
Yeah.
Gone from the traditional, red trucks going out of doors, which clearly are sort of meat and drink, if you like, and the things that the public would most associated with us. But when you extend that now into things like international search and rescue, and events that happened, and we briefed our fire authority as to who would be deploying, 7 from Wales, 2 from Mid and West Wales in particular. And the skills that we've got in this arena, which are internationally recognised, I think is something that is something we really be proud of. And I know certainly from a public perception and a fire authority perspective, they are absolutely amazed in the work that we do above and beyond, I'd say, our traditional public service and the things that we provide out in communities, So
100%.
Yeah,
but people forget that does also have an impact. And this is not the pessimist. It's just me offering the other side of the coin to you, which I know most fire officers would never say, but it's like, that has to be replaced. Do you know what I mean? People forget, so for people that are unfamiliar with it, nobody gets paid to do international search and rescue as such. What happens, and please correct me because I'll probably get all of this wrong and fumble through it, but national resilience or something behind that, we basically backfill with our fire and rescue services staff because we have a wonderful amount of skills and obviously a great familiarity with working in hostile environments. But the services themselves are continuing to pay those people, as they should, of course. But then you still have to you've got to do overtime and you've got to sort out all of that back end. And it's hard enough, and we're going to get onto some of the challenges around recruitment in a minute. It's hard enough to backfill all of those people, and recruitment in the fire and rescue service has its challenges as well. So I just want to acknowledge you and all the other fire officers out there, but we want to do it and we know it's the right thing to do, but it doesn't make it easy as well, because there's so much else happening in the sphere, isn't there?
No, for instance, one of our two deployments, well, both of them are middle managers. One's a station manager, one's a group manager. The group manager is head of our southern division, so that's our Swansea and Neath Talbot county council areas. These are predominantly our main risk sites in terms of coma sites, in terms of urban population. Our full-time stations are all 5 out of 6 are based in those two. So it's a busy division that he runs. And as you said, when you're away for extended periods, we have to manage that. However, it's that balance, isn't it? Of doing the right thing and supporting. For us, it's about our day-to-day community safety and operational response. Out there, this is lives and the tragedy that goes on. So I think we have to get things in perspective. And as I say, I've never ever had any pushback in terms of fire authority or any sort of political pushback in terms of the work we do. I think everybody recognises that the need is out there.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by Gore-Tex Professional Fabrics. Now, we all know the working environment of a firefighter is filled with challenges. We face serious risks on the job, such as heat exhaustion, burns, physical and mental stress, and we frequently come into contact with high levels of toxic chemicals. Now, I have been wearing Gore-Tex for nearly 2 decades on the front line, working in hostile environments, tackling challenging incidents from firefighting to water incidents and in urban search and rescue environments. Gore-Tex have a well-earned reputation for protecting professionals in the fire and emergency services through their family of highly innovative, waterproof, breathable moisture barriers that exceeds global performance standards and are trusted worldwide. Gore-Tex, going further together. It's great that they recognize that, but also, I learned from a fire officer not too long ago that it's not like a business where you can, or even like certain aspects of the government where if we go over budget, it doesn't matter. There is some legal framework that around that you as a chief fire officer are responsible, that we can't just keep paying overtime. And we won't go down this rabbit hole much longer, I promise. But that is a really difficult position. And the book does end up stopping with you and all the fire authority around, the bean counters need to fall in line. We can't just go, it's the right thing to do. And then we'll all just pay for it. Do you know what I mean? It's tough because we all want to do it. We know it's the right thing to do, but I didn't realize how much legally sits on the shoulders of fire officers sometimes.
Yeah, we are on cost recovery for it, so we are able to cover that cost. But I think is one thing covering costs, is another one covering skills and experience as well. Yes. So bringing somebody new into the role, you would expect a learning curve. You would expect people to perhaps not pick up. We do have obviously a management structure within these places, within these divisions, so we are able to bring people up, and we account for annual leave for 5-6 weeks a year. You expect to be out of the division, so we do have an ability, and it gives on the plus side, it gives somebody an opportunity to develop in a new role. And to take on those reins and have a glimpse of what it's like to run at a different level, I guess.
Now, you're quite new into the role with the greatest respect. When did you step into your fire officer role now?
Yeah, so I started last April. I've been deputy at. I'm a one service individual. I joined in 1996, so my coming up to 27 years within one service, which I guess is reasonably rare.
It is these days, isn't it? You see more people jumping and chopping and changing around. I don't know why. I think just we move around more as just families and just as, life is a bit different than it used to be. You used to see people in 25 years service a lot, but now it's become rarer.
Yeah, but I think to move from firefighter in one service up to chief is not. I wouldn't say it's not the norm. I think there's been some significant impacts in terms of the pension changes. So we've seen a lot of senior leaders leave in the last few years, so which has created opportunities. I've one service. I've worked at every level all the way up, which I think has a real benefit to it in terms of credibility on the ground. People understand that I've done every role and that I've worked in a range of stations. So I've got those sort of networks built up within the service. Hopefully, I'm probably not the right person to ask, but I think I've been consistent, and my approach in terms of my integrity has come up through, so people understand that actually, I'm the same person I was when I was a firefighter, albeit I'm in a very different role. So, it's been a challenging few months, I got to say.
I say you've kind of been dropped in the deep end with it, with so many stuff happening over this last sort of 12 months. And now, obviously, it's not something we're going to necessarily discuss today, but we're heading into some potential industrial action, stuff like that. It can never be nice as a chief fire officer to be in those positions, because we haven't seen industrial action for quite some time. It was only when I first came in that we actually had one, and that was a long time ago now.
Yeah, so the bow wave of COVID, albeit when I took over in April, we were starting to certainly climb out of that situation, but still very much with us in terms of some of the restrictions we had in place. So, but there's a bow wave that comes behind that in terms of pressure on public services. Somebody's got to pay for it at some time. So, a new fire authority. So, we represent 6 constituent authorities across Mid and West Wales. And we had, out of 25 individuals who form our fire authority, 17 were new. So
wow. Okay.
through local government elections in May last year. And so that's been a big learning curve. I think
that must have its own set of challenges and people's preconceptions about what the fire and rescue service do or should do or shouldn't do, and that but that's hard.
Absolutely. And those individuals are very skilled and experienced in their own areas of public life in terms of being elected members, but a lot of them have come in with no real background knowledge of the fire and rescue service. So our role has been to educate, to inform, to support, so that they can make the best decisions, if you like, in terms of supporting the service going forward, because the fire authority is a legal entity on its own right, and it has the ability to set the budget that they feel is for an effective and efficient service. So, and then on top of that, obviously the loom, the spectre of industrial action on top. Which again, there's an offer on the table now, and a ballot will go out shortly to firefighters across the UK, and we will see. Hopefully, I really hope that we can avert and avoid industrial action, and because from my experience of being through it in the past, there are no winners really.
No, it's an ugly business, isn't it?
It is. And,
kind of the only card public servants have to play, but it isn't. I wanted to just jump back for a second on that. We won't linger here too long, but that, or the fire authority relationship with chiefs, because you hear people say like, oh, well, firefighters, we shouldn't have to justify what we do and all this sort of stuff. Yeah, but there is a metric. There has to be a metric for what we do. So you kind of do have to account for what you're doing, how you're adding value, how you're making the community safer, how response works and all that sort of stuff. Just give people a brief insight, a sort of elevator pitch on how you report into that, or how just general chiefs, don't have to make it about yourself and Wales necessarily, but just help people understand a little bit the relationship between how chief fire officers and their senior leadership teams report into those authorities and what we consider metrics for success for fire and rescue services. Yeah,
okay. So the authority obviously sits above the fire and rescue service. I've got delegated authority to manage the service as I see fit on a day-to-day basis. So that means operational response. I'm able to a degree via money from one department to another, or one to another, to manage the service effectively, and that's around our 3 pillars of prevention, protection, and response. And obviously there's a whole range of other things that we do. From a scrutiny, and it's a governance and scrutiny role that fire authority will play above that. And we have not only the full fire authority, which meets quarterly, but we also have 2 main committees, performance audit and scrutiny committee, and then our resource management committee. So one managing the finances and the other one managing wider performance or whatever. So I'm accountable into those fora in terms of reporting how we do, what we've done, what our plans are, how we spend our money, and obviously there are external influences that come in terms of audit and scrutiny from Audit Wales, who come in.
I was about to say, so if people are already sort of managing and observing those analytics and metrics, why is there also then a need for like HMI reports and those inspections? I know we're going down a rabbit hole. I promise we'll get back on track in a minute, but I'm just curious as this conversation unfolds. Why is there a need to have that as well?
Well, in Wales, it's not. The HMI CFRS does not apply. That's a Home Office.
Thank God. Sorry.
I'm
sure they add a lot of value, but sometimes it just gets confusing.
We do have a CFRA, so a Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor into the Welsh Government, who, because Fire in Wales has been devolved since 2005, so we are accountable into the Welsh Government, but obviously initially into the Fire Authority, but the Chief Fire and Rescue Advisor has an inspector power or powers in the same way that HMICFRS does, but it's not managed in the same way in terms of that, coming in in-depth reporting, and the inspection protocol that occurs in England. It's certainly not at that level. Albeit there is always scope to. We've done peer assessments in the past, and that's something that we may come back to. But it's not quite the same in Wales. It is run differently. But the bulk of my reporting is into the Fire Authority, but obviously scrutiny goes on at Welsh Government in terms of what we do and how we do it as well.
Roger that. So one of the main things we wanted to get speaking about today was the on-call sector. Now, we recently had some wonderful episodes on from a guy called Steve Sadler talking about the multitude and complexities of the on-call and or retained and or voluntary services, as people have different terminology across the globe. But in December last year, and correct me if any of this is wrong, because it was my last reference when I delved into some of the work, it was agreed 13% hike to your services budget, which is wicked, levied against all 6 local authorities from Mid and West Wales. One of the big things that you wanted to try and, I don't say fix, because that might sound a bit harsh on your predecessor, but is this, you term it as an arrest, the decline of this on-call sector, and we've had it on the cheap for decades, and it's, how sustainable is it and how challenging is it? So, I mean, when we last looked, there was 702 posts for retained firefighters in your service, but we're missing over 100 of those positions you're struggling to fill. Why do you think it's such a struggle with on-call recruitment these days and sort of retaining and recruiting those people?
Yeah, absolutely, Pete. And it's a multi-layered issue. And just going back to the budget, our estimations for budget this year would be 9% would keep us at a standstill. So that would be no further growth investment. They would literally be there to pay for salaries and
again, that's not putting in place. If we get obviously a rise in firefighter wages, that could blow this whole thing out the water anyway. Which obviously, I want a rise, and so it's a really tough position to be in. Sorry I interrupted you, but it's tough.
Absolutely. So in Fire Authority on Monday, the Fire Authority agreed, and this has been part of our sort of informing and educating process for them to be able to make decisions for an effective, efficient service moving forward. So this has been probably 6-7 months in planning in terms of corporate budget planning days. We go in front of the local authority treasurers and all county councils. I don't need to, but we do that from a sort of a transparency perspective.
Okay.
Now, the 13%, and I don't want to get into the detail, but 13% shows a sort of 4% increase in terms of our standstill. So we've got a 4% to play with in terms of investing in the service.
Yeah.
When you look at the actual figures, that'll have gone up because there's been block grants that are now going to be paid directly into fire and rescue services in Wales, as opposed to coming through a different means. So it looks slightly different. But if I can talk about that sort of 4%, because that's the critical figure that we've currently got to play with. So when I went in front of Fire Authority in terms of they asked me what my priorities were. I'd also covered that in my interview, so I replayed, but obviously a number were new. But when they came into post in July, what were my priorities? And my priorities at that time were operational resilience, not only retained duty system, but whole time as well. Training and development in terms of ensuring that whilst our calls thankfully have reduced in terms of the success of our prevention work, a lot of experience has left the service in the last few years. So we need
colossal amounts over the whole of the UK. Yeah.
And I know you'll know, Pete, that we have individuals in the service now who haven't had the same experiences that we had when we were going through.
You can go on trucks and there'll be 5 years experience on the whole truck, which is, people say dangerous. That sounds a bit harsh on the firefighters that are working. It's not dangerous. It's just something you definitely need to be aware of. That's for sure.
So in the absence of that naturally occurring, in those naturally occurring incidents, we need to now supplement that with, better scenario-based training, better exercising and that sort of thing, which, we need to invest in. And the third thing for us is there's a target with the Welsh Government for net zero for public sector organisations by 2030. As you know,
that's not very far away, is it?
It's not. It's coming closer and closer. So as you'll know, our our fire stations are, well, I
Very
say
old.
almost without exception, they are generally old.
You know what? Is that realistic though? It just requires such a colossal amount of investment in infrastructure. You can't be asking public services to take that out of their own pockets because these are £1 million projects, all of them.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a challenge. I think I'm all for setting, ambitious targets. Whether we hit it or not, will be we'll wait and see. As exactly as you say, asking for new capital monies to invest in our building stock is going to be difficult.
Well, even just like when I was speaking about electric trucks to someone recently, and you'll know better than me, I'm sure, but it was like they're like £800,000 versus £280,000 for a normal fire truck as we see them now. So you're asking people to replace their fleets with more sustainable vehicles, and you're like, okay, what are you going to give us a subsidy? Where's all that money going to come from? We can't just replace all of our vehicles. But sorry, I went down another rabbit hole.
Yeah, I think it's two things there, isn't it? One is the environment, so the actual estate itself, and how can we make those more fuel efficient through light sensors that lights that come on when people are there and often they're not.
There's lots of low hanging fruit, yeah.
Yeah, biomass boilers. There's a whole range of things that we can do to make them more fuel efficient and more effective. Plus, site sharing, which we do a lot of. We site share with Welsh Ambulance Service Trust, with Dyfed Powys Police, South Wales Police.
Because I think there's loads of benefits there in terms of training and development as well. Like we should do more training with our shared services because there's so much benefit there.
I think you're absolutely right. We've come into the sort of trauma world. We do a lot with medical response in West Wales. So that ability to work side by side or co-locate and then start to train with those individuals is fantastic. It's a benefit. The benefit side. Plus, if let's say if you've got an ambulance station or a police station or a fire station, all using energy, if we can co-locate in one, the benefits are quite considerable across that piece. But you go the second bit, then you talked about so that's the estate side of things. The technology in terms of vehicles clearly needs a lot of investment. You're right. I think the last I heard of electric fire engine was around about 800,000 pounds. You're absolutely right.
It's not realistic. It's not quite there yet. That's the only thing. I mean, we will benefit tremendously from all of the stuff that's happening in the public sector because obviously we will ride the wave of all of the innovation that happens around just general public electric vehicles. So it's not like we've got to do it all ourselves. But equally, people don't realize the fire and rescue services is still a very small part of the wider vehicle manufacturer. We can't just wander in there and give them demands. We're very small, really. We can't really be asking lots of things and we don't always get what we want because we're a very small part of the market.
Absolutely. And I think the technology will catch up. I think it's driven by the need. It's economics, supply and demand. And if the demand is there, then the suppliers will provide it. It's like that technology catching up. But I think the thing for us is we need to get. We can't have appliances coming back to stations and then off the run for 6 or 8 hours while they recharge. We've got to have a model that is sustainable, all the time, or almost effectively, or a swap out. And that's the challenge for us. I think. Plus, as well, we not only drive to incidents, but when we're pumping at incidents, that's going to use battery power. It's not quite as simple as. And we can't refuel when we're there, So there's a lot to be done, I think, for the infrastructure. We're looking at some superchargers. We've already got a lot of our sites have 7 kilowatt trickle charge, which is okay for what we call our grey fleet, our vans and cars.
Do you do that? Is that accessible by your firefighters? Just out of a general random thing, because I've got 2 electric vehicles myself, and something we don't yet do in our service is offer people the ability to charge their vehicles and like do a payment scheme or whatever. And I would love to see that come in. I imagine it's just not on somebody's list yet, but some services do it obviously for their own fleet. But there must be like a green tick box. If you offered that to your staff, it would show that you're, helping in various ways and blah, blah, blah. I don't know what the box would be, but do you do that for your staff? Is there a facility for people to plug in and pay at their stations? Because like if I'm, whole time, if I'm on station night shift, I'd love to be able to plug my vehicle in and just pay whatever it is, 7-10 quid. I don't know.
That is something we're looking at. We do it for our, like I say, for our grey fleet and our TAC officers' vehicles and that sort of thing. But the wider thing is something we're looking at certainly because
I can't feel like it can't be too much of a jump because you've all got. I mean, in my service, you've all got your own fob. to like get into vehicles, get into buildings. We track which vehicles we're driving, and we refuel a vehicle using your fob. It must just be an easy thing. I know it's not easy, but like just for me to fob and say, this is my own vehicle. Sorry, I interrupted you again.
No, you're absolutely right. It's not beyond the. It's quite a simple thing. It's just we need to get.
I'm sure it's not simple, but I'm sure it also is. It's not too much of a leap.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is. I don't think it's. There shouldn't be any barriers there. It's literally somebody logging on and using a payment card or whatever it is.
Yeah. Anyway,
yeah, I think it's something we can certainly move towards. But yeah, and like I say, if we are encouraging people to use electric vehicles, and especially if they come do a night shift or a day shift or whatever, they know then that their vehicle's ready for them to when they go home. It's common sense, isn't it?
Take us back, sorry, to the on-call. We went off on a wonderful little rabbit hole again.
Yeah.
So where are we at with that in terms of solutions, challenges, number of people, funding, etc.?
So first of all, what I've said to the authority, I think this is from the RDS point of view, and I know those terms are interchangeable, on-call RDS. But,
well, if someone gets upset, don't worry about it. Yeah. We know what we're on about.
The only thing people get upset is the volunteer aspect, and we are.
Well, it's just we have a global audience, is the thing I say. So with a number of Australian fire crews and stuff like that, all still, and this astonishes people when we think, and we do want to pay volunteer firefighters or on-call firefighters, retained duty systems, but it's still a great job, and a lot of people do it for free. I'm not saying we should. I'm just saying it is still a used term globally.
Predominantly in this country, the model is obviously that they are contracted. They have, they are employees as opposed to pure volunteers. So yeah, the challenge, and I think it's been a generational one. We've seen numbers decline over a number of years in terms of the people who want to come and do it, the people who come in, start it, then find out actually I can't sustain it. I think some of the barriers we've got are the grey book in terms of what we can offer, and that's currently 100 and a 75% contract. And we can't go outside of those other than improving terms and conditions. Now, there are fire and rescue services that have done that, most notably our colleagues in South Wales, which is our neighbouring service, who have brought in a salary scheme.
Have they really? That's a much nicer way to... Why is that a barrier for yourselves? Obviously, there's a template out there. Why can't we get that one through?
Yeah, it was brought in, I'm going to say, around 2006-07, when... How can I say? Public funds were probably a bit more a bit less challenging. It is an expensive scheme. The thing that prevents us primarily in that space is money at the moment. So what I've proposed, certainly into our fire authority, was to try and solve a number of issues that the retained are telling us that they find challenges with. So firstly, we have individuals who, in their primary employment, if they have to take leave from their primary employment to come and do training courses with us, in some cases they are losing money, which can't be right. So we're trying to ensure that they have parity of pay, so they're not being disadvantaged by coming in and doing courses with us. That's the one thing we're trying to address. We're also trying to say to people, because we have instances where 100% contract on the retained is 120 hours a week. I'll use broad figures. We have some flexibility around, but not a great deal.
Is that the lowest contract you can do?
Well, 100% is 120 hours, and then we have a 75% contract at about 96 hours.
Wow, that's still a lot. I think ours go all the way down to 48. But anyway.
Yeah. So, but you would still have to pay a 75% contract, and that's the challenge for us. So we are looking at models whereby what we've had is, I'll give you some real life examples. We say individuals who, say they're in their mid to late 20s, they perhaps haven't got a family together yet, or the pressures from their primary employment aren't, too onerous. Mm-hmm. What we find is they come in, they start on the retained, they're able to give, around 90 odd hours a week on a 75% or more, whatever. But as their life changes, two things really. Once they find out that actually there's a lot of time on call, and our retained stations are, in comparison, obviously, to our whole-time stations, are proportionately quieter. So they can bring a lot of availability, but perhaps not having enough, or in their own minds, they're not getting out on the truck enough, which is, in one sense is good from our prevention work. But
romantically, firefighters join because they want to do the stuff. I wasn't able to go out to Turkey on this occasion, and whilst I think it's great what we're doing out there, of course, there's a large part of me that's annoyed I'm not there myself. Let's just be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you want to be doing it, and that's right.
That's what you train for.
So, and secondly, then I think as their life changes, and that might be, getting married, partner, whatever. settling down, maybe children. The pressure on those individuals then, as their domestic situation changes and perhaps their primary employment, they may have promotions within that, more pressure on them, perhaps longer hours. And I think we are the first thing that gives in a lot of those instances. And I'm basing it not on sort of my personal opinion, but the feedback we get. So we have individuals who say, well, do you know what? I can't commit to 90 odd hours a week, but I may be able to come down. But what happens is if on that 75% contract, which is the minimum we pay, if we have individuals on a 50 or 60 hour contract, that causes dissension at stations. Other people are upset that actually somebody's getting the same money or the same retaining fee. So it causes that sort of those issues at a local level. However, and this is the sort of the things we are looking at to try and address some of these issues going forward, if we are able to say, well, if a 75% contract was 60 hours and 100% contract is 90 hours, and if you wish to do more, and there are individuals who wish to do more, we will pay you 125% contract for 120 hours or some of that. So we're trying to reduce or bring that threshold down. Fewer hours means we can stay within that 75% contract. So those are our plans. I would say, whilst we seemed on track on Monday and we comfortable our plans, I think the pay award now, we're going to have to factor that into what does that look like in terms of finances. So that might hamper next year in terms of what we're able to supply, but those discussions are ongoing. But what I've said is, and I started my answer to this question to say it's a generational problem. We've seen a decline. We were, in terms of the UK, really well blessed. Our availability some 7-8 years ago was around 95% in the RDS. In the space of 7 years now, it's gone down to 83%. Certain areas that are down to 67, 66%. So we've split that up by counties, so our authorities. So I'm just concerned that we're paying a lot of money out, but a lot of the time it's not available, and that's always a challenge. So I've said it's a generational problem, and it won't be fixed in a year. We have to move towards a position whereby it is more sustainable. You're
going to have to go through the valley for a little bit first. It's not just going to turn around tomorrow. And I think you're right in the generational thing. I was an on-call manager for about 10 years, and I think it's one of the not just blowing my own trumpet, but it's one of the hardest jobs in the service because you're obviously usually managing more staff. And the complexity and variety and out of hours messages here and there and pleading for availability and everything like that. It's so difficult. And like you say, traditionally on-call stations are areas where there's less demand, which usually means they're out in rural areas. And people, newer generations now, they want to get in and do stuff with their families. They want to go away on the weekends and they want to go into the cities and they want to do all that stuff. And so it makes it significantly harder. There's just so many factors there.
Absolutely. And I think we're seeing, I don't know what generation we're on to now. Is it Generation Z? I can never remember.
I can't remember.
I think we're seeing, I think COVID has accelerated it as well. I think people are making life choices now and they're saying, actually, really, really difficult, challenging time through COVID. And I think people are reevaluating and perhaps saying, do you know what, this is more about me and my family as opposed to that sort of community giving aspect of, and
part of you says that's a good thing to look, but also you're like, wow, that doesn't help fix the problem. And there is a huge, some people still romantically do take a lot of value. I mean, I always say people join the emergency services not for the income, but for the outcome, as corny as that sounds, but it's that you feel like you're part of something that's making a tangible difference. You can, when you attend an incident, you can see the from and to, or when you work with the community, there's a very legitimate from and to difference between the impact you're having. But like you say, when things get really tough, that romantic side of what you do for a living can sometimes be difficult to justify in your own mind, especially even to your partner or to your family, or it's like, it's tough.
Yeah, absolutely. And we, yourself, Pete, we don't, nobody's getting rich on the pay system. It is, but we did recognize them more, and it is pleasing. I know the pay award that came through this week, there is a further period of consultation now around RDS pay, which I welcome. I think if it can be at least pushed forward at a national level, I think it's important. I think the whole time, rightly so, it is their primary employment has been the primary focus area now. But we need, I always describe our service as an on-call service backed up by whole time, because we have
what percentage of your staff is on call? Because it's a lot.
So, and you
RDS,
use 702. We and our whole-time establishment is just under 400. So it's 2 to 1 almost, not quite. Wow. And just a breakdown of stations. We have 58 stations. 2 are volunteer, and obviously we have no sort of contractual hold over those individuals, and they do only provide a narrow range of a response into the communities in very quiet areas. So of the remaining 56 stations, 43 are purely retained.
Wow.
Yeah. And of the give us a remaining 13, 9 have a retained complement. So 52 out of 56 stations are either purely standalone retained or have a retained, we have a day crewed stations here. I'm sat here in Carmarthen as a day crewed station, but it has a retained complement as well. So a second pump.
Whole-time positions there must be like hen's teeth then. They really are. Crikey.
Yeah, so we have six whole-time stations. We have 7 day crewed stations, so primary crewed during the day for those individuals who, so positive hours during the day, and then on a retainer on night as well.
Do they still live on the site though? Is it one of those setups where they have like a living accommodation across the road-ish, or?
No, we did have what we called self-rostered crewing. I think it's called different things around the country. Day Crew Plus, I think, and LLAR is another one that's used. So we did have accommodation on 2 of our stations. But when the South Yorkshire ruling came in a few years ago, we recognised, whilst it wasn't directly sort of applicable to us, we looked at, and our model was very, very similar. We recognised that we could potentially open to challenge. So we've changed those 2 stations. One's gone back to whole time, and one is now a day crewed station.
That really annoyed me when that happened. And this is a thing, like, I don't want to get into a union conversation, but like I was frustrated that the unions didn't support these 24-hour shifts and day crew plussing stations and things like that, because it allowed people that didn't live in the local areas to be able to work there for, I don't know how yours works, but in ours, I think they could do 4 days straight and then travel back. And it just opened up your pool of available people. And also it gave more flexibility for people because I think we should have a variety of different work streams or working systems, so that people with different challenging life circumstances, whether they want to be on call, RDS, day crew plus, whole time, whatever. So anyway, I don't know if you even want to give an opinion on that, but it frustrated me to see that disappear.
Yeah, the challenge came around the working time directive, and it would need a
local collective agreement. But the people wanted to do it though. Anyway, it annoyed me.
Yeah.
You don't have to give an opinion on that. It just annoyed me.
No, when I don't think it's something we'll revisit unless the working time directive changes.
Yeah, I know. So on call, why are we struggling so much? In fact, can you go for a romantic walk with me for a second? Like, I was thinking about how we can make the life of firefighters a little bit easier, and I didn't know if, and I'm sure this is a colossal piece of work with government, but like, there's 2 ways to make somebody's life better. There's lots of ways, but if we just talk financially for a second, like, you can pay them more, or you can make their outgoings less. And I wondered, like, if there's ever anything in, I know it'd be enormous, but like, for emergency services workers, if there would be a way that we could reduce their cost of living, not by paying them more, but like saying, if one of the members of your household is a member of the emergency services, they get less off their tax, or they get whatever. Has that ever been explored or discussed? Is that just me whimsically knowing nothing about anything, saying things that could never be done?
I think those are wider policy decisions that would have to be taken.
Huge government decisions. They are way beyond either of us. But
I think as well, I've tried, and to be fair, the Welsh Government are attentive in terms of the issues we face in the retained, and across Wales. I'd say Mid and West Wales is akin to North Wales in terms of rurality. The reliance on RDS. So Welsh Government are certainly listening to that argument, and we are in discussions with how we can resolve those, or at least move to a better norm. South Wales is slightly different, a little bit more compact in terms of geography and their balance between whole time and retained. So, but they're still heavily reliant on retained. albeit, as I say, they've got this salary scheme in place, which appears to address some of those issues. But yeah, in terms of that wider policy piece, it's it is pleasing to see that it's going through this sort of NJC in terms of if you look at the discussions that are going to go on in the next few months around control pay, RDS remuneration, and that. So it is starting to gain some traction, I think, at a national level, and that's really pleasing, because I do feel the RDS has, been the poor relation in lots of cases. The NJC conversations are around a whole-time pay, and rightly so. People's primary employment. But I think we are heavily reliant on the RDS in the UK, and it's as I said in the press, it's my articles, that I do feel it's unsustainable unless we try and address and arrest that decline.
And we've kind of got away with it, like I say, a little bit, because we're coming from an era and a generation who did experience some of the high volumes of calls and some of the more salacious, enjoyable time. Enjoyable is a bit harsh, but now we really are running straight head first into this. Colossal amounts of people are retiring. What does the package look like that we're offering new people joining the services? And so many of them are looking at it going, well, I did want to do it and I do want to do it, but that's not realistic. I can't come and do that. So we have to face into that now. We can't just keep sidestepping the problem.
Absolutely. And I think, go back to remuneration, and, I think people are in it for a range of different reasons.
Yes.
But money is important. And I think if they're giving that, go back to that age-old thing, if they're giving that huge commitment, and it is, it can be in excess of 100 hours a week. I played this into Fire Authority, and one member said to me, can I just clarify? He said, you came up and quite chat. He said, I think you said 100 hours a week. Did you mean 100 hours a month? And I said, no.
Exactly. People just don't get it. But this is the whole point of the podcast. Like, I think people don't understand. I'm not saying like, oh, do you know how hard it is for us? I'm not saying that life's hard for lots of people, but the commitment is colossal. And just it's a million little conversations, like to your partner, like, no, we can't just go to that town to go shopping. Actually, I can't. I used to feel like I'd committed an offense because I had to have like supervised visitation with my kids, or it felt that way, because I'd have to go to my mum and dad's with my kids because I was on call. Like, my missus would be at work, but if I get a call, I can't just run off and leave my kids at home. So I had to be with my parents, with my kids. I couldn't just be at my house with them. And it's just little things like that are big things.
Huge things, absolutely. You need to be available and to go at a minute's notice. And I think, it does impact on your life. And we talked at the start now, or one of the earlier questions was around as your life changes, if you're, single and no sort of kids when you in your 20s, you live a very different life, as you know, Pete. If you're in your early 30s, a bit more pressure, primary employment.
Yeah. And we can't just say, on-call or RDS is a young man's game, because the amount of time and training it takes to get these people, you've also got to get your return on investment. So they can't just come and join from 18 to 30 and then leave, because that's also not sustainable.
Absolutely. And the cost, yourself, the
massive amount to train people up. It's not cheap.
We estimate around about £6,000 just to get somebody their initial training, and that is, as you say, without PAs, without RTC. We get them to sit in a truck and be an active part of the crew. Now we're doing that over 100 people a year, so £600,000 is going, and we're doing that year on year on year, and like I say, it's unsustainable. We'd be able to use that money if we could reduce that even by half. All of a sudden there's more money we can redirect into other areas, rather than it being lost year on year. It's a sunk cost that we never really realize, because people leave and then we're back.
Do you use any of your RDS staff as a backup? It sounds harsh, like for your whole time stations? Do they have the opportunity to do shadow shifts, to work as part, rather than paying overtime for the whole time? And I know some people will go, oh, but then you're taking money out of my pocket. But it's like, it's a great opportunity to develop them, to keep them more engaged, to give them exposure. Do you have the opportunity to do that? Because that's another way of like keeping people engaged over their career, is they can go and work on a whole time station every now and again, and they have like an overtime list, but you're paying them flat rate. Do you do that?
We do. So when I took over as chief, one of the things I've tried to do, and I guess it happens in every service in the country and every organisation, this perhaps detachment from senior management to the coalface. So I've excuse me, I've done shifts on every watch on every whole time station, on day crewed stations. I've gone and sat with them, ridden the truck, rather than just being a station visit for an hour, which senior managers do annually at every location. I've gone and actually spent some time, and I was at Neath Fire Station, which just north of Swansea, and I was sat in the back with two firefighters, both on bank crewed contracts, or
Nice.
one was from a local station, one was a little bit further away. Both RDS stations came in for the day to do a shift. And so there is that opportunity there. But we also offer that the whole time. In some instances, particularly with the specialist assets like turntable ladder or an SRT team, we have to bring in whole time because
Yeah, of course. They don't have the skill sets. It's got to be a like for like skill set, hasn't it? How do you justify keep doing those sorts of shifts for yourself? Because I love that, and I speak to a few officers that do it. Some people are like, "Oh, it's just a little silly ploy. They're not really that interested." But then some people, especially people like yourself, are like, "No, I was a firefighter once. I'm not." With a great respect to direct entry, they're like, "I'm not a direct entry or anything like that. I genuinely still like riding the thing, and it reminds me a little bit and gets me out of the office, and I really enjoy it." But then other people are like, "Shouldn't you be doing chief stuff?"
It's a good question. It was a deliberate sort of act on my part, or a decision on my part, to try and break down some of the myths. I'm conscious that there's sometimes a lack of understanding on stations about why we make decisions at senior management level. So try and get under the skin of things, find out what is actually happening on the coalface.
Because if you're only there for an hour, sometimes you don't get the truth either. You'll have been to thousands of them. You sit there and everyone's bloody quiet. And they go, "Anybody got any questions?" And I ask 10 questions and people roll their eyes. But then I'm like, anybody else? Come on, Dave, you were saying about this, or Sarah, you're asking about that. And they're like, "Oh, no, it's fine, it's fine." I'm like, "Well, don't do that." And then when they leave, give me a round full of bitching, because I'm not interested in it. This is a human being. They put their trousers on one leg at a time in the morning. Just speak to them.
Yeah. And I think that was been my modus operandi. And you're right, when you start there, people are a little bit reticent to come forward and talk. But when you break bread with people who sit down and have a meal, all of a sudden they'll come out.
Start to relax a bit. They start to be honest. They realize you're not going to sack them if you tell them the truth.
This is about them understanding me understanding them, me understanding and finding out things like, and they seem like little things, but they're not. We've talked about some of the equipment they've had on trucks, and things like we've got a winch on the front of our. We got Volvo appliances that has to be stowed in the back of a locker, and then actually manually put on, because it affects the sensors on the front of the pump. So actually, could we now go back to the manufacturer and say, we would, it takes time to do that. Little things like that, that come forward. We've instances as well where they've said, actually, this piece of kit not very good, whatever. Okay, but equally on the flip side, they've said we've got impact drivers that we've put on recently. So
they're great.
And they said it's an absolute game changer.
It's how the vehicle was put together. It's the best way to take it apart.
100%. And so I fed that back into our R&D team, and they're absolutely delighted. And all of a sudden, they get that feedback to say, actually, we've done something. We found a bit of a kit and equipment. We put it on trucks. We've done, and they feel like a rosy glow of, actually, we're making a difference out there as well. So, it's a two-way process. But I'm not sure whether that would have permeated back into the organization from frontline. People will tell you when they're unhappy, but they often won't ring up and say, "I'm really happy with this." It's
100%. I also think it's nice to see that managers lead by example a little bit as well. Like, just keeping themselves. I mean, I met you and some of your senior leadership team at obviously the Welsh Challenge last year, and even just things like practicing what you preach. You haven't got to go run a Firefighters Challenge, but staying in shape and remaining operational, maintaining that competency to actually be in charge of an incident. We've had chief fire officers in our services like come and work on shifts, and they can actually be in charge of a job. They're not just so removed from how the operation works that they don't understand it anymore.
No, it's really important, I think. And it's funny, when I've had a number of incidents, and I was always a jinx when I was on stations, and it doesn't seem to have left me, because in the shifts that I've done, I've had a buried retrieval, I've had a major waste fire, I've had
Nice.
amputees, I've had all sorts, and it's I think some of them want me to come back because they want the action, but I think some of them are actually, can you stay away because
Oh, that'd be every
yeah,
day, mate. And that sounds like me blowing smoke up your ass. But like, I enjoy that because it just gives you such a holistic look. You know, you turn to people on the back of station, on the back of trucks and in the fronts and everything like that. And you don't really get a full understanding of the wider context. And we tend to fill in the blanks. And sometimes we fill in the blanks with negativity and pessimism. But if you've got somebody that's actually got an insight, it's really nice. You know,
yeah,
that's why I like these sorts of conversations, because it really gives you a better understanding for some of the challenges. Because again, echo back to the beginning of our conversation, no one's going to work with malice. No one's playing one-to-one defense on your way of working. Do you know what I mean? They're not trying to maliciously make it harder. This person has a logic, and in their mind, the decision that's been made was probably one they did the best they could with the circumstances they had.
yeah, absolutely. And for me, the buzz I got when I had that first call back it never leaves you. And
Yes, we're just
it's
kids. We're just kids in our heads, really. We love it.
absolutely, it took me back, and it was just fantastic just to see. That's how I remember it. You know,
Yeah.
it is a great feeling, and people say best job in the world, and I still think it's the best job in the world. I know it's been under huge pressure and challenges, but I still do think that we do a fantastic job, and I think we're naturally humble. I think in a lot of it, I know we're under huge pressure. There's a lot of pressure in the media, negative press out there at the moment, but I think we also need to focus on the good stuff we do as well. It's a challenging environment at the moment, and there's a lot of work we need to do in certain areas. But we need to address that front on, Pete.
I wanted to ask you before we kind of wrap it up. We've got a few other things I wanted to ask you about, but one of them is around being a chief fire officer. Why did you want to do that? You came all the way as a firefighter. It's a long, old, slippery, greasy pole to have to get there. There's a lot of fire and rescue services that are absent a chief fire officer at the minute. I don't know if you probably know far better than I do, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but like some services are struggling to fill those senior leadership positions. Why do you think that is? So, because we're going through so much hemorrhaging of experience and people are retiring, that people might be moving up these ranks quite quickly. I have fears and concerns that people maybe haven't gone through the levels of development that would make them most emotionally aware and or have a big enough level of self-awareness of their own impact to be in some of these roles. Why did you want to be in the role that you're in now? Because it's a sticky spot to be sometimes.
Yeah, it is, and I think you mentioned about sort of parachute entry or whatever. I've come up from the bottom as most do, which I think is a positive thing. I think it can work both ways, but I certainly talked about the sort of credibility, and you've done all the jobs on the way up. When I joined, I didn't have any aspiration or ambition to be a chief. I think all I wanted to do, and all I've ever wanted to do, is to work hard and be effective at whatever role I'm at. I do get bored quickly. I like a challenge. And I found myself, once I've done 2 or 3 years in a role, if I feel and people have got the faith in me to move on, that I've taken those challenges. So the variety in this job is I think is second to none. It's probably mirrored in organizations like the police. And
I think you're right. I always say life's boring for boring people because I get to do loads of cool stuff. So when I hear other firefighters saying it's boring, I'm like, no, you must be boring because you're in the wrong place. There's so much stuff to do.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was a firefighter, I worked on busy stations in and around the Swansea area. And then I've done things like staff officer. I've been a training delivery officer, so training courses at front end. I've been organizational development, so looking at those wider sort of leadership skills. I had a secondment into Welsh Government for a year. I've also worked then, at a more sort of senior middle management level, running a county command as was. Running our senior ops as an area manager, assistant chief, deputy chief, NFCC. I'm a trustee of the NFCC as well. I sit on the NFCC. I've recently taken on a role in the Firefighters charity as a trustee as well. So,
nice.
It's the range of opportunities I think we get in this service. I think is absolutely fantastic. Yes, it's a challenge, but don't do the job if you don't want the challenge, because it will come. And at the moment, we're in the middle of a, financial challenge, cultural challenge in terms of things.
I think culturally, we're paying the bill that was actually due a long time ago. I don't personally, and this isn't your view, it's mine. I don't personally, from my experiences, feel that the culture is as bad as some things are portraying it to be. I think it was. And I think that's where some of the reports have come from. And I imagine, and I'm sorry for people that are struggling in services these days, quietly suffering in hole somewhere, but I don't think it's an accurate reflection of the people that I've personally worked with, or the people I've managed a few disciplinary cases in the past, but very few and far between.
I don't know if we know the extent of it. That's the worry for me.
Yeah,
We're
because
in the
people
middle of
people that are suffering don't always speak out.
absolutely. We need to have that open dialogue. And if that raises more things than we thought we had, then we have to deal with that. And we have to deal with that head on. And, I think we talked about diversity in the earlier conversation
Mhm.
we had. We've got to improve the gender balance. We've got to be more accessible to underrepresented groups. And we've got to be seen as the career of choice for those groups and individuals, because we are funded by the public. We should be representative of the public and our communities. And I think there's an awful lot of work to do. Yeah, you're right. I think,
but I think we're about to benefit from all that, because I think we've been doing that work for a long time. But because recruitment had slowed for like a couple of decades, now with so many people leaving and doing so much recruitment, I feel like we are going to, and I've seen it in lots of recruitments, the recruitment courses that I run in the training development. It's like we are starting to reap all of those seeds that we've sown over the last couple of decades. We are seeing so many more women and diverse range of people join the job now.
Yeah, and I think it's an issue across. I don't think it's fire and rescue service specifically. It's
No.
about the police.
Even just look at the nursing, honestly, right? They have tried to increase male nurses for like 4 decades, and the percentage increase has been minute. So it's not just us that find it difficult.
I think it's public perception of certain roles.
Yes,
like
it is.
Midwives, you would expect, rightly or wrongly, a midwife to be a woman, and why? That it is a skill that can be taught or learned. But it's about that public perception. The boys playing with fire engines, girls playing with dollies. We've got to try and make it that people don't see it as a barrier or something they can't do. It is a real challenge out there, and I think we've got to try and address that. But in terms of culture, I suspect it's generally a few bad eggs. I think they're in the minority. I would hope they're in the minority.
Yeah.
But what you permit, you promote. And I think too many people who are not in that camp, but will walk past it and not challenge it is
100%. So let's go there for a second, if we could, before we kind of wrap it up. I wanted to ask you a few pieces around leadership. Obviously, you've gone through several different ranks and things like that. Talk to me about, firstly, what are some of the common mistakes maybe that you've made or that you see other leaders make when they start moving through these levels, and maybe advice you'd have for people moving into new leadership ranks?
I think try and accept that you won't get things right. Accept that there is a learning curve. That you don't step into a job day one and know about it. So the first part of when I've come into the job is to listen, see the strength in the team. I've got some fantastic people around me. I'm fully aware in terms of from a self-awareness point of view that there are things I'm good at, that things I'm not so good at, and I think it's that blend of skills, recognizing who can do what in a team. I think there's something about, I talked about self-awareness. Where do you get that from? Well, that can be a range of things, like perhaps a 360 evaluation, having a coach and a mentor, somebody who perhaps can guide you through those things. I've been very lucky. I've locked on to 2 chief fire officers from a coaching and mentoring perspective, and I've asked them to share their experiences around, what did you get wrong? If you had your time again, what would you change? And without exception, they've been completely open and frank to say, yeah, do you know what? I took it down.
Those relationships you've just developed naturally, sorry, because some people think like mentoring and coaching needs to be a formal thing, and I get paired with somebody, but I don't think that's the case. I think you've got it. It's personal development. It's your development. You've got to kind of reach out for it.
Yeah, and I think as well, relationships are really important, and if you feel a connection, a sort of simpatico sort of connection with somebody, you're more likely to say, actually, this is somebody. And I think you need to respect that individual. You need to respect not only their sort of professional acumen, but their personal values as well. So the 2 individuals I deal with certainly fall into that category. I've been really well supported through the NFCC. We've got NFCC chair Mark Cardigan who's come in. And he's been great support, identified for new chiefs. He's put a forum, and you talked about the churn that's happened in the last few years. And Mark has put a support mechanism in place for new chiefs so that we can come together and share the challenges that we've got, because it is a lonely place.
Yeah, I'll bet.
And I think sometimes, you think like, I'm the only one going through this. Well, you're not. You're absolutely not. And your experience, and there's nothing worse in the world than feeling that you're the only one doing something. And whilst it doesn't take away that sort of pressure and challenge, if you think actually there is a way through this and somebody else is doing it as well, it does make you feel normal. And we all want to feel normal at the end of the day.
Roger, really appreciate your time today, mate. Really, really appreciate it. You've been very generous with it this morning. I feel like we've gone in so many lovely different directions. For anybody that hears this around your kind of local area and they've learned a little bit more, and maybe it's kind of opened up their perspective of what the fire and rescue service is all about, where's the best place for them to go? We're speaking about recruitment and stuff now. Where would you suggest that they try and reach out to, whether it's a local station or a website or something?
Yeah, by all means. I think, from social media platforms, obviously we're active on the main ones, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. We also push it through our external website as well. But please call into the station. As I say, 52 out of 56 have a retained compliment on them. So the high likelihood is that they will have, if they haven't, they direct you to somewhere where they can help out, talk about what the role is about, what it encompasses, some of the challenges, and I think some of that would help in terms of people understanding the role before they come into it, and I think that may help to improve retention in the future.
100%. Roger, thank you so much for your time today, my friend, and I look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you, Pete. You take care.
Firefighters Podcast is put together to develop, inspire, and hopefully even motivate those individuals who have chosen to serve our communities and be part of the first responder family. It's brought to you by myself, operational firefighter Pete Wakefield. If you have enjoyed today's episode and you want to see the podcast continue, please head over to our Patreon page where you can support the ongoing efforts of the podcast. Please hit that follow, subscribe, or rate button on whatever platform you're listening to. Please support your emergency services responders, and thank you for listening.